Welcome to our deep dive into Prague. We're going to be unearthing all the layers of history and culture, and even like the organizational structure that make this city so unique, and it's all going to be based on this Wikipedia article. So get ready to explore Prague beyond just those pretty photos you see online.
I think what's really fascinating about Prague is that its history goes way beyond that kind of fairy tale city image. It's a history that spirals through time, kind of like the way the city is structured.
A spiral. That's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it this way. You have 57 individual city districts. They're called the Městská část, each one with its own distinct character and history. And then those districts are grouped into 22 larger administrative districts, which are called the správní obvod. But here's the thing. These administrative boundaries often cut across those historical lines. So you end up with this blend of old and new within a single district. Like you could be walking down a medieval street and then suddenly you find yourself in like a modern business center, all within the same district.
Wow, so it's like layers upon layers of history all intertwined. And I've always wondered about the name Prague, or like Praha as it's called in Czech. It sounds so mysterious. Is there a story behind that name?
Yeah, there are actually two main theories about the origin of the name Praha. One links it to the word pra, meaning threshold. And if you imagine those wooden beams that were used to regulate the flow of the Vltava River, acting as a sort of gateway to the city.
Oh, I see. So Praha was kind of like the threshold of the river, the point where people entered.
Exactly. And then the second theory connects the name to the word pražit, which means to burn. And this suggests that the city might have originated from an area that was cleared by fire, which was a very common practice in early settlements.
Okay, so maybe the first Praguers were the ones who like literally burned their way into the history books. But either way, both theories give you a sense of how deeply rooted the city is in its landscape.
Yeah, and speaking of roots, you can trace Prague's history back to Paleolithic settlements, and even like the presence of Celtic tribes in the area. But it was the Přemyslid dynasty that really put Prague on the map when they made it their royal seat of power.
That's incredible to think about how a city evolves over time, like from a small settlement to a royal hub, and then eventually into this cultural powerhouse that we know today.
Yeah, and you can't really talk about Prague's cultural rise without mentioning Emperor Charles IV and his son Wenceslas IV. They ruled in the 14th century, and they really turned Prague into a major European center. It was during their reign that Charles University was founded, which was the first university in Central Europe.
So if I were a student back then, Prague would have been the place to be.
Absolutely, yeah. It was attracting scholars and students from all across Europe. But of course, no city's history is without its challenges. Prague has definitely seen its share of conflicts, from the Hussite Wars in the 15th century to the 30 Years' War in the 17th century.
And then more recently, the devastation of World War II, and then the subsequent years under communist rule. It's hard to imagine what the city and its people went through.
Yeah, but what's remarkable is how Prague has always managed to bounce back, each time with like a renewed spirit and that determination to preserve their unique identity. Like take the Velvet Revolution, for example. Prague played a crucial role in that peaceful transition from communism to democracy in 1989.
It seems like every corner of the city has a story to tell, but it's not just the grand historical narrative, right? There's also that unique blend of cultures that you mentioned earlier. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, Prague has been a crossroads for centuries. It's like a meeting point for Czech, German, and Jewish influences. And this fusion of cultures is kind of woven into the very fabric of the city.
And today, even though that German-speaking population largely disappeared after World War II, that multicultural legacy is still palpable.
You can see it in the architecture, you can see it in the food, the arts, and even just like the way people interact with each other. It's a city that embraces diversity and it welcomes visitors from all over the world.
It's fascinating how Prague has held on to its unique character. Despite all the upheavals that it's experienced, it makes you want to explore every nook and cranny, discover all the hidden stories behind each building, each street, each bridge.
And speaking of bridges, there's one in particular that has become synonymous with Prague, like a true icon of the city. But we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
You were saying something about a bridge that's become synonymous with Prague. I have a feeling you're talking about the Charles Bridge.
You got it. It's more than just a way to get across the Vltava River. It's really a symbol of Prague's history and its artistry. You can imagine yourself strolling along the cobblestones, surrounded by those Baroque statues, with Prague Castle as this dramatic backdrop, like stepping into a postcard.
I've seen pictures, but I can only imagine what it's actually like to experience that in person. It must be breathtaking.
But the Charles Bridge isn't the only architectural marvel in Prague, right? No, not even close. Prague is a city where you can find architectural styles from different eras kind of coexisting beautifully. You'll find Romanesque and Gothic houses nestled beside Renaissance and Baroque palaces. And you even have splashes of Art Nouveau and Cubism.
Wait, Cubist architecture? I never knew that was a thing.
Yeah, it's actually a Czech specialty. And Prague has some fantastic examples of it. Like take the House of the Black Madonna. It's this striking building with all these sharp angles and geometric facades, a real testament to that Czech avant-garde movement in the early 20th century.
It sounds like a visual feast, and I'm starting to get what you mean by that spiral analogy. It's not just the districts, it's how different historical periods are kind of layered throughout the city's architecture as well.
Exactly. And if we continue our little journey through time, we have to talk about Prague's modern architectural gems. Like, have you heard of the Dancing House?
Oh yeah, the building that looks like it's swaying. It's such a playful contrast to all that more traditional architecture surrounding it.
Yeah, it's a great example of how Prague embraces the contemporary designs while still respecting its rich heritage. But let's step back into those historical layers for a bit and talk about a landmark that holds a very special significance: Prague Castle.
Hard to miss that one in the photos. It seems to just dominate the city's skyline.
Well, it's actually a complex of palaces and churches and gardens. That has served as the seat of power for centuries. Emperors and kings have walked those halls, making decisions that shaped the course of history.
It must be awe-inspiring to stand in a place that's witnessed so much history unfold.
And within those walls, you'll find St. Vitus Cathedral, this masterpiece of Gothic architecture that took centuries to complete.
It's incredible how much time and effort went into creating these structures. Truly labors of love.
They were. And each one tells a story. And speaking of stories, you can't really visit Prague without experiencing the Old Town Square, the heart of the city. And that's where you'll find the famous astronomical clock.
I've heard so much about that clock. Is it true it's more than just a timepiece?
It's a marvel of medieval engineering and artistry. You have moving figures, a calendar dial, even like an astronomical display. And it draws crowds every hour to watch the spectacle of the apostles appearing the window above the clock face.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see why it's such a popular attraction. It's like a little piece of theater right in the heart of the city.
And the square itself is surrounded by these beautiful buildings, like in all different architectural styles from Gothic to Baroque. And then you have the tin church with those iconic spires, just adding to that really dramatic skyline.
Prague's really living up to its nickname as the City of 100 Spires, huh?
Absolutely. But there's another side to Prague, like a place where history and reflection kind of come together. Have you heard of the Pinka Synagogue?
It sounds familiar. I think I read about it in the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, it serves as a poignant memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. And the interior walls are inscribed with the names of over 77,000 Czech Jews who perished during the Nazi regime.
Must be a very somber and moving experience to visit.
It is. It's a stark reminder of the horrors of that time, and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Prague's seen its share of darkness, but it's also a city that honors its past, both the triumphant and the tragic.
It makes you realize that every city, no matter how beautiful or charming, has these layers of complexity and stories that deserve to be heard.
And that's one of the things that makes exploring Prague so fascinating. You're always discovering these new perspectives, these new layers of meaning, and new connections between the past and the present.
Like peeling back the layers of an onion, each layer revealing something new.
And speaking of layers, remember that unique administrative structure we talked about? The spiral of districts within districts. Well, that's reflected in Prague's transportation system as well.
Oh, right. The article mentioned something about Prague having a highly rated public transportation system. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, imagine yourself navigating Prague with ease, hopping on and off of trams, metros, and buses that are all seamlessly connected.
That sounds super convenient, especially for a visitor who might not be familiar with the city.
It's truly a model for urban mobility. They have these 3 efficient metro lines that just crisscross the city, an extensive tram network that reaches all those outer districts, and then this comprehensive bus system to fill in all the gaps.
Wow, sounds like they've thought of everything. No wonder it's considered one of the best public transportation systems in Europe.
And they're always innovating. Like they've reintroduced trolleybus lines after a 50-year hiatus.
Trolley buses. That's a blast from the past. Are they still using the old technology?
Not quite.
Yeah.
They've actually modernized the system.
Yeah.
So in some sections of the trolleybus routes, there aren't even any overhead wires. And the buses just run on battery power in those areas, switching back and forth between electric and battery mode.
That's so clever. Like, they combine the nostalgia of trolley buses with the efficiency of modern technology.
Exactly. And speaking of efficiency, did you know that children under 14 and adults over 65, they ride for free on all of Prague's public transportation?
Wow, that's amazing. It's clearly a city that values accessibility and making it easy for everyone to get around.
And if you're looking for kind of a unique way to experience Prague's public transportation, you got to try the Petrine funicular.
The funicular. Oh, I've heard of that. Isn't that charming little railway that goes up Petrine Hill?
That's the one. It's been running since like 1891. And as you go up the hill, it offers these amazing views of the city.
It sounds like the perfect way to combine sightseeing with a little bit of transportation history. But I have a feeling there's more to Prague than just its landmarks and efficient transportation. What about its cultural scene? Like, what does it have to offer in terms of the arts and entertainment and that unique atmosphere that draws people in from all over the world?
Well, we've only just scratched the surface of what Prague has to offer, but that'll have to be a conversation for the next part of our deep dive.
We've journeyed through Prague's history, we've marveled at its architecture, and we've even taken a ride on its efficient public transportation. But a city is more than just bricks and mortar, right? It's the people, the energy, the creativity. That's really what brings a city to life. So what about Prague's cultural scene? What can you tell me about that?
Well, Prague's cultural scene is as vibrant and layered as the city itself. It's a place where history and art intertwine, where you can find everything from grand opera houses to intimate jazz clubs, avant-garde theater productions to traditional puppet shows.
Wow. It really sounds like a city that embraces all forms of artistic expression. Is there a particular art form that Prague is known for?
Well, Prague has a very rich musical heritage. I mean, it's the birthplace of composers like Antony Dvorak and Bedřich Smetana. And you can still hear their music echoing in concert halls and churches today.
Yeah, the Wikipedia article mentioned the Czech Philharmonic. Is that one of those orchestras that people travel from all over the world to see?
Absolutely. It's considered one of the most respected orchestras in the world, known for its precision, its passion, and its deep connection to that Czech musical tradition.
And what about theater? I read that Prague has this thriving theater scene as well.
Oh yeah, it's a city that breathes theater.
Yeah.
You have these grand venues like the National Theater and the State Opera, showcasing classic productions that'll just transport you to another world.
But I imagine there's more to Prague's theater scene than just the grand classics.
Oh yeah, much more. Prague is known for its experimental theater, these small independent venues that really push the boundaries of artistic expression. And then there's the legacy of Václav Havel, the playwright, the dissident, and eventually the president, who really used theater as this powerful tool for social commentary and political change.
Yeah, his story is fascinating. He went from being a banned playwright under communist rule to becoming the first president of the Czech Republic.
Exactly. And his plays, which were often performed at the theater on the balustrade, continue to be staged and studied around the world.
It's a testament to the power of art to really challenge the status quo and inspire change.
And speaking of inspiring change, there's another theater experience that's quite unique to Prague, the Jara Simon Theater.
The what? I don't think I came across that one in my research.
Well, that's because it's dedicated to this fictional character, Jara Simon, who was supposedly this Czech genius who excelled in like every field imaginable, from science and invention to music and literature.
Wait, so they're performing plays about a character that never actually existed?
Yes. It's this brilliant and hilarious satire. It pokes fun at Czech history, culture, their national pride.
It sounds like something you have to see to believe.
It's a must-do if you really want to understand Czech humor and that kind of self-deprecating way that they celebrate their own culture. But Prague's cultural scene isn't just about this highbrow art and theater. It's also about those everyday experiences, the places where locals gather, the energy of the streets.
So where would you recommend a visitor go to get a taste of that local energy?
Well, for starters, you can't really miss Prague's traditional pubs. They're kind of the heart and soul of the city. You can sample some of the best beer in the world there, enjoy that hearty Czech cuisine, and just soak up that lively atmosphere.
I've heard that Czechs take their beer very seriously.
Oh, they do. And they have every right to be proud of that brewing tradition.
But what if you're not a beer drinker? Are there other places to experience that local flavor?
Oh, of course. Prague's coffee house culture is legendary. These aren't just places to get a caffeine fix. They're like social hubs, intellectual salons, places where time seems to slow down.
Yeah, the article mentioned that some of these coffee houses were frequented by famous writers and thinkers, like Franz Kafka.
Imagine yourself sitting in like a dimly lit corner of Café Louvre, sipping a strong coffee and maybe jotting down some thoughts in a notebook, just like Kafka might have done a century ago.
It's amazing to think about the conversations and the ideas that must have been exchanged in those historic coffee houses.
Yeah, you have Café Arco, Café Slavia, each one with its own unique history and ambiance. It's like they're these little time capsules, preserving that bygone era of intellectual and artistic ferment.
It sounds like a coffee lover's dream, but is there a particular coffee house you would recommend for a first-time visitor?
If you're looking for a student hangout in the heart of Old Town, I'd recommend Café Montmartre. It's got that kind of bohemian vibe, affordable prices, and it has a history of attracting artists and writers.
It sounds like my kind of place. So we've covered history, architecture, transportation, even theater and coffee houses. What else is there to know about Prague?
Prague is a city that rewards exploration. It's a place where you can just wander down cobblestone streets, discover these hidden courtyards, you stumble upon unexpected art installations, and you can just get lost in that maze of history and culture.
It sounds like a city that's best experienced on foot, with an open mind and a sense of adventure.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to get lost, to stray from the beaten path. Follow your curiosity wherever it leads you.
So as I plan my trip to Prague, what's the one piece of advice you would give me?
Don't just stick to the guidebooks and the must-see lists. Take some time to just wander, to soak up the atmosphere. Connect with the city's spirit on your own terms.
That's great advice. It's a reminder that travel is about more than just ticking off landmarks. It's about experiencing a place in all its complexity and beauty.
And Prague is a city that offers endless possibilities for exploration and discovery.
Well, this deep dive into Prague has been absolutely fascinating. It's clearly a city that has it all. History, architecture, culture, and a spirit of resilience and reinvention. I can't wait to experience it for myself.
And as you embark on your own journey through Prague, remember to keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your heart ready to be enchanted by this magical city.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your passion for Prague. Until next time, keep exploring.